I have watched people search for money the same way desperate men search for medicine in a dark room. They keep reaching, they keep grabbing, they keep hoping the next bottle will save them. And because they are frightened, impatient, or embarrassed by how little progress they have made, they are willing to believe almost anything if it is wrapped in enough confidence. That is the modern online. Money world in one sentence: a young person opens his phone with a very ordinary hope. Maybe this year I can finally get ahead. Then the algorithm goes to work on him. One man tells him affiliate marketing is the secret. Another tells him drop shipping still works. If he only uses the right creative, the right funnel, the right angle, the right hidden trick. Another swears the future belongs to day trading. Another says crypto will free him. Another says AI has made everything easier, which is often another way of saying someone is about to sell him a crowded, fragile, low-value opportunity in a shiny wrapper. By the end of the week, the young man is not richer. He is more confused. And confusion is one of the most expensive states in finance because confused people do not stand still long enough to build anything real. They keep moving, they keep resetting, they keep calling motion ambition, when what they are really doing is avoiding the discomfort of staying with one hard thing long enough for it to become valuable. I want to speak plainly about that. Not because plain speech is fashionable. It is not. Because plain speech is useful, there are ways to make money online, real ones. There are also ways to lose months, years, dignity, and attention while telling yourself you are being entrepreneurial. The world now offers both in astonishing quantity, and if you do not build a filter, the trash will find you before the opportunity does. That is why I do not begin this subject with tactics. I begin it with classification. Most people fail online not because they are incapable. They fail because they put good energy into bad vehicles. That is a terrible way to live. I have always believed you should never ask first how hard you can pedal. You should ask what machine you are pedaling. A man pedaling a bicycle on a good road may get somewhere. A man pedaling a bicycle into the ocean is not courageous. He is confused. A great many online money ideas are bicycles pointed at the ocean. That is what the young do not understand because the internet does not reward honesty nearly as much as it rewards stimulation. So let me give you an honest architecture. Everything I have seen online that creates money falls into 4 broad groups: trash, easy, medium, hard. That is not poetic language. It is operating language. Trash means things you should walk away from because even if they occasionally produce income for a few people, they are poor vehicles for most ordinary people in the world we now live in. Easy means businesses. You can get off the ground quickly if you learn a small, useful skill and tie it to an obvious customer problem. Medium means outcomes you can deliver that are more valuable, more stable, and more scalable because you are not just doing tasks anymore, you are solving business problems. Hard means ownership plays, systems plays, and equity plays that can eventually become extraordinarily large, but only if you survive the dull years when they look unimpressive and unworthy to almost everyone around you. If you do not know which bucket you are in, the internet will let you pretend you are building something real while you are actually circling inside trash. That is what destroys so many lives. Now let us begin where all adult thinking should begin, with refusal. The trash bucket is where many dreams go to die, wearing motivational language. I do not care how exciting the pitch sounds. If the vehicle is weak, the driver does not matter much. There are some businesses and activities that are not merely difficult. They are structurally poor bets for the average person trying to build durable income in 2026. I would put speculative NFT flipping in that category. I would put casual crypto trading in that category. I would put multi-level recruiting schemes in that category. I would put low-level data entry, basic captioning, and a great many tiny commodity tasks in that category because the artificial intelligence layer is eating those jobs faster than human beings can build moats around them. I would put generic Fiverr microtasks there as well if the task has no pathway upward, no relationship to a larger business outcome, and no room for skill compounding. I would put print on demand for most people near the same border. I would certainly put casual day trading there for almost everyone who merely wants fast money and not a life organized around deep obsession, emotional control, and a willingness to pay enormous tuition to the market. Why am I so blunt about these things? Because bluntness is merciful when the alternative is months of false hope. A good opportunity does not need you to be delusional to survive. That is one of the finest filters I know. If a person can only stay committed by pretending the economics are better than they are, then the opportunity is weak. Trash opportunities usually share the same features. The industry is shrinking, or becoming commoditized. Artificial intelligence is removing the human premium. The upside is thin, and the competition is infinite, or the game is structured in such a way that it is easier to lose money than to make money. That last point matters enormously. I do not like games where error is punished harder than skill is rewarded. That is one reason I have never admired trading for ordinary people. The spread, the emotion, the overconfidence, the time waste, the seductive illusion of control, all of it adds up to a very bad climate for a beginner who is simply trying to get his first real online income. I know people hate hearing that because many of them do not want a business. They want a shortcut with good lighting. Too bad. Finance is not obliged to honor that desire. The first job is not to become rich quickly. The first job is to stop volunteering for structurally weak games. So I use a very simple trash filter. First question, is AI already replacing this or rapidly compressing the price of it? Second question, is the industry shrinking or turning into a race to the bottom? Third question, is it easier to lose money than to make money? If the answer is yes to even one of those, I become very cautious. If the answer is yes to 2 or 3, I leave. There is nothing noble about drowning in the wrong vehicle. Now, after refusal comes the first useful bucket. The easy bucket. People hear the word easy and become childish immediately. They think, effortless. I do not. Simple enough to launch within a few months if you are willing to learn one narrow, useful skill, talk to real customers, and do small things well and repeatedly. That is where a great many people should start. Not because it is glamorous, because it teaches the real foundations of business, how to solve an obvious pain, how to frame an offer, how to talk to a customer in the language of result rather than the language of your own effort, how to collect money, how to deliver, how to improve, how to survive rejection long enough to find fit. Those are priceless lessons. The trouble is that most people do not want priceless lessons. They want impressive stories. I prefer the lessons. Short-form editing is one example. Not because editing is magical, because the world is flooded with people who want to be seen and too few who can help them turn long, messy attention into short, useful attention. Every creator, coach, local expert, real estate office, dentist, lawyer, salesperson, podcaster, consultant, and founder suddenly wants clips. The demand is obvious. The barrier to starting is not especially high, and artificial intelligence used intelligently can make a beginner far more productive than he would have been just a few years ago. That is not a business empire. It is a very respectable doorway into cash flow. The same goes for social media copy, built around business outcomes. Most businesses do not need pretty words. They need words that help them get customers, keep attention, convert traffic, fill calendars, or move people from awareness into action. That is a commercial problem, not a literary one. If you can help solve it, you can get paid. And because language sits near revenue, the skill compounds well. Another easy bucket opportunity is helping small businesses set up AI tools that save them time and catch or qualify leads they are currently losing. I like this category because the value is practical and immediate. A small business owner does not need a lecture on artificial intelligence. He needs fewer missed calls, fewer slow follow-ups, fewer repetitive tasks, fewer hours wasted by his staff on work a machine can do well enough. If you can set up a basic chatbot, a simple receptionist flow, a lead routing system, or a qualification layer that actually gives the owner more time or more closed business, you are not selling technology. You are selling regained hours and retained revenue. That is much easier to sell. The easy bucket also includes the people who become useful behind the scenes for higher performers. Virtual assistants done at a serious level can be extremely valuable. Not because answering emails is glamorous, because high-value people hate administrative friction. Time is the scarce asset in their life, and they will pay to get it back. Many young people think they should avoid assistant-style roles because the work sounds too humble. That is a mistake. Humble work next to capable people often teaches more than glamorous work next to fools. If you become useful to somebody operating at a high level, you are being paid to learn how leverage really works. That is a tremendous bargain if you are awake enough to notice it. There is also user-generated content, or what some people now call creator-style product footage made by ordinary-looking humans rather than expensive polished studios. Why does that work? Because buyers trust realness when it is done credibly. Brands need volume. They need variation. They need content that looks native to the feed rather than alien to it. So there is money to be made in organizing creators, filming content, editing deliverables, and turning what looks casual into something commercially useful. Again, the lesson is the same. You do not begin by building an empire. You begin by becoming useful in a direction where the demand is obvious and the skill is teachable. There is a reason I like this bucket. It teaches the beginner the most valuable sentence in business. Do not sell your time, sell a result. This is a hard sentence for people to understand because they have spent their whole lives being paid for hours. The market cares much less about your hours than you think. It cares about what those hours solve. An owner will not pay you because you suffered nobly for 9 hours. He will pay you because the videos got cut, the leads got followed up, the system got installed, the calendar got filled, the emails got handled, the content got published, or the revenue problem became smaller. That is the frame. Result first. Time second. Once a person learns to think that way, he is already leaving the employee operating system behind. That matters. Now let us move to the medium bucket because this is where online income begins turning into something more stable and more serious. The medium bucket is where you stop being a task doer and start becoming an outcome owner. That sounds like vocabulary. It is actually identity. A task doer waits for instructions. An outcome owner defines the goal, takes responsibility for the path, and absorbs enough context to make the result happen without needing a map for every turn. The world pays more for that, always has, always will. This is why some people remain forever trapped at low rates. They never become responsible for anything bigger than the next instruction. There is nothing wrong with starting there. There is danger in staying there in the medium bucket. The easy skills get systematized and attached to business problems. An AI automation agency is a good example. Not because the label is trendy, because businesses are overwhelmed with repetitive work, manual follow-up, disconnected systems, clumsy operations, and lead loss. If you can walk in and not merely install a tool but improve a business process, then you are no longer selling software setup. You are selling time back to management, lower headcount pressure, fewer missed opportunities, and better operational leverage. That is real business value. LinkedIn growth systems sit in a similar category. Most founders and executives do not actually want content. They want authority, reach, trust, and deal flow. If you can build a system that helps them appear consistently, sound intelligent, attract the right attention, and convert that attention into warm opportunities, you are now much closer to revenue than a person merely scheduling random posts. That difference matters. The same can be said for serious AI content agencies that can generate volume while preserving message quality or motion graphics work that makes a brand's output look measurably more premium and effective. The medium bucket can also include small software plays. Micro-SaaS is a good example. The internet likes to make software sound mystical. A lot of software is simply a repeated annoyance turned into a small monthly product. A form tool, a workflow layer, a browser extension, a little automation bridge between two systems, a reporting dashboard, a document processor. None of these sound romantic. That is why they can be valuable. Romance attracts too much crowded capital. Useful annoyances are often better businesses. If you solve something a business deals with weekly or daily and you charge monthly for that relief, you are beginning to understand the deeper beauty of recurring revenue. And recurring revenue matters because it changes the emotional experience of money. A person living on one-off projects is always hunting. A person with retainers, subscriptions, and repeated business still has to perform, of course. But the floor becomes less fragile. That is a major upgrade. So if you want to move from the easy bucket to the medium one, you must learn 2 higher order skills. First, build case studies, not generic claims, not self-esteem speeches. Evidence, I did this for this kind of client. Here was the problem, here was the intervention, here was the result. That is how the market begins trusting you faster. Second, sell monthly outcomes, not isolated acts of labor. A one-time project can create a little money. A retained responsibility can create a business. Those are different worlds. Now we arrive at the hard bucket. And this is where the language of ownership finally becomes unavoidable. The hard bucket is not where beginners should begin, just because it looks richest from a distance. Distance hides the flat years. That is the whole problem. People see the later multiple and never respect the earlier desert. I know that pattern very well. The public loves hockey sticks and refuses to study the flat line that made them possible. The hard bucket is where you build something bigger than your own labor and eventually own an asset someone else might want to buy, fund, or copy at scale. Software companies live here. Acquiring small, boring businesses and modernizing them lives here. Building a brand with real distribution and then attaching commerce or deal flow to it lives here. Licensing, playbooks, systems, or proprietary process lives here. Investing in early founders can live here too, but I would not recommend that most people start there because it requires judgment and access most do not yet have. The hard bucket is about leverage in the proper sense, not borrowing money to magnify impatience, building systems, teams, content, code, distribution, recurring demand, and ownership, so that value is created while you are not personally touching every unit of delivery. That is the real meaning of scale. The word empire gets used too casually. Now a serious business becomes empire, like only when it can survive the founder's mood. That is the standard. In software, for example, you can solve a real problem once, then sell the solution repeatedly. That is a very different business from selling hours, with a boring acquisition, say a campground, a local service company, a rental fleet, or some neglected old school operator. The value may not be in genius at all. It may be in bringing systems, automation, attention, pricing discipline, marketing, and better operating logic to something the old owner ran by habit. That is how fortunes are built more often than people think, not through originality alone, through structure. The hard bucket can be very rewarding. It can also be merciless, because the flat years are real. A software founder may work for years before real traction appears. A content machine may publish for a long time before distribution compounds. Meaningfully, a small acquisition may be operationally ugly before it becomes elegant. A licensing playbook may take a great deal of hidden refinement before someone will pay real money for it. That is why most people never make it there. Not because the hard bucket is unavailable, because they cannot survive the flat years without constantly switching identity. This is where I want to say something unkind but true. The shiny object syndrome is not mainly a market problem. It is a character problem. A person starts something, it becomes difficult. The results are slower than his imagination demanded. He becomes embarrassed. Then he tells himself a flattering lie. The real issue is not my lack of endurance. The real issue is that I am in the wrong thing. So he changes, he starts over. The beautiful thing about starting over is that it erases the evidence of your earlier immaturity. You get to feel hopeful again. You get to say, now I have the right vehicle. The tragedy is that repeated resetting destroys almost all compounding. A man can spend 10 years changing buckets every 18 months and call it hustle. I call it expensive avoidance. The winners often lose more than the quitters, not because they are less talented, but because they stay in the arena long enough to absorb all the losses necessary to get good enough to win. That is a very important difference. The quitter feels clean because he never stayed with one thing long enough to exhaust his excuses. The winner looks foolish for longer and gets paid later. That is the bargain. I have always liked the sentence focus until successful. It is blunt enough to be useful, not because focus guarantees a good outcome in every case, because the lack of focus almost guarantees mediocrity. Now, what does this mean practically if you are trying to make money online in 2026? I would not ask first, what is hottest? I would ask 4 simpler questions. What is trash that I should refuse immediately? What easy skill can I learn that solves an obvious pain and gets me paid fast enough to build momentum? What medium-level business outcome can I eventually own so I move from task payments into retainers and recurring value? And what hard asset or system path might I graduate into if I prove I can stay with one direction long enough to deserve scale? That is the latter. Refusal, momentum, outcome ownership systems, and equity. That is a much cleaner way to think. And if you want a further filter, here is one I liked. Does the thing get stronger in the age of AI or weaker? People are making a terrible mistake right now. They are trying to sell labor where AI is compressing labor value every month. That is a losing fight. I do not want to compete where the machine is turning the human into a commodity. I want to stand one layer higher. I want to use AI to remove the drudgery from my output, increase my speed, increase my margin, and let me solve more valuable problems. That is the correct relationship. The machine is not your identity. It is your leverage. That is what the wise will understand and the frightened will miss. So I am not interested in businesses whose only pitch is that a human can still do this manually. That is too weak. I want businesses where AI helps one person or a tiny team deliver something that used to require far more friction. That is one of the great arbitrages of the moment. The easy bucket uses AI to make simple services more productive. The medium bucket uses AI to tie services to measurable business outcomes. The hard bucket uses AI inside systems, products, distribution engines, and acquired operators to expand margin, speed, and enterprise value. That is the map. The people getting hurt are often standing outside the map entirely, still trying to make old internet ideas work because they were once told those ideas were digital freedom. Many of those ideas are now digital dead ends. That is what trash means. It means not only low quality, it means low future. Walk away. Do not argue with dead ends because they are popular. Now let me tell you what I would do if I were 19 or 23 or 28 and trying to build income online from nothing today. I would begin with one easy bucket skill attached to a real business pain, perhaps editing short-form clips for professional service businesses and local experts, perhaps AI receptionist installation for local operators, perhaps AI-assisted lead follow-up systems, perhaps executive support for a high-output founder. I would pick one that I could explain in a single clean sentence, then I would build an offer around the result, not the labor. I help local dentists recover missed leads in 30 days. I help founders turn one long video into 20 high-performing short assets every week. I help local service businesses answer, qualify, and route inbound calls automatically. That is the frame. Then I would contact one potential client every day until the market said yes, not 50 in one wild burst, and then nothing for 3 weeks, one a day. The point is not motivational intensity. The point is repeatability. Then, once I had 3 to 5 small real outcomes, I would turn those into proof and raise the quality of what I sell. The moment I understood the deeper business problem, I would shift toward medium bucket work, perhaps monthly automation retainers, perhaps content systems attached to inbound lead flow, perhaps a tiny software tool if the same pain kept repeating across clients. That is how a smart person graduates. He does not leap from confusion to empire. He earns the next level by understanding the current one well enough to see where the margin and scale really live. Only then, once he has some skill, some capital, some proof, some judgment, some tolerance for long flat years, would I encourage him to play in the hard bucket seriously, build a real software company, acquire a boring operator and modernize it, build distribution and attach a product, buy equity, license the operating intelligence he has accumulated. That is the correct sequence. Most people reverse it. They fantasize about the hard bucket because they want the later payoff without the earlier becoming. That is like wanting to be old and wise without first enduring years young and uncertain. Not available. The sequence matters. Just as important, once you pick the lane, stay with it. I like the phrase 1,000 days of focus. It sounds extreme only because most people are absurdly fragmented. 3 years of real focus in one sensible direction would transform the financial life of many people who currently spend those same years pinballing between ideas. 1,000 days is not magical. It simply forces a person to stop negotiating with himself every time the work gets less flattering. I want that. I want a person documented in public if possible, not because public visibility is inherently noble, but because it can create accountability. I want him showing his work, learning, refining, finding his voice, becoming known for something, not everything. You can do anything. You just cannot do everything at once and still expect the economics of compounding to respect you. That is the price. Pick the vehicle, refuse the trash, get paid in the easy bucket, grow into the medium bucket, earn your shot at the hard bucket, and do not keep resetting just because the first season was flatter than your ego could tolerate. That is the summary. Online money in 2026 is not a mystery. It is a sorting problem. The world is full of bad vehicles, good starter vehicles, scalable service vehicles, and real ownership vehicles. The tragedy is that most people do not sort. They sample, they watch, they react, they bounce, then they say the internet is crowded, everything is saturated, nothing works, AI ruined everything. AI did not ruin everything. It simply made confusion more expensive and clarity more valuable. That is a different sentence. Clarity still wins. Useful skill still wins. Outcome ownership still wins. Systems and ownership still win. Focus still wins. What lost value was shallow imitation. What lost value was commodity labor without leverage. What lost value was the fantasy that easy money would keep hiding the absence of real usefulness. That fantasy is dying. Good, the truth is healthier if you want the final sentence. Here it is. Do not ask which online business sounds coolest. Ask which vehicle lets you become useful quickly, irreplaceable, gradually, an owner. Like eventually, that is the path. It is not glamorous at the start. It becomes powerful later. That is enough for me.